So Congress has made a deal on funding the government. Tonight, Nancy Pelosi has agreed with Mitch McConnell on how to go forward with that. So that's not going to be one of the things that could slow this down. Let's listen to what Chuck Schumer said about the possibility of slowing this down in the Senate.
We have tactical options to slow them down. We will use every tool in the toolkit. Now, admittedly, McConnell has changed the rules, so we have fewer tools and they're less sharp. But every tool we have, we will use. To slow it down is to give us more time to convince the American people. And I don't believe it's a fait accompli.
Senator Booker, I know of no tool that can really, in a significant way, slow down a nomination like this. The tools you have for legislative matters are more varied, especially budget matters and budget points of order, but none of that stuff applies here. It seems the Republicans have enough days left on the calendar this year to get this done, if that means keeping you in over Thanksgiving or whatever it takes. But in the slowing it down, it sounds like Senator Schumer's hope is that the debate that will be heard in the slowing it down will have an effect that could then somehow change the outcome of this.
Lawrence, I know very well that you know the rules of the Senate, and one of the many areas of mastery, you know what tools we have, and the toolbox is very, with the way that Mitch McConnell's been running the Senate, the toolbox is got very few, let's say, magic wands in it that will do any good, and you know that. So we have a difficult challenge, but you put it right. We still don't know what the response of the American people is going to be. And just like healthcare would have been torn down had not the American people stood up, spoke up, rose up. Marches, demonstration, appeals to senators' conscience, and eventually that changed the way. This is the possibility that we have before us and you saw it with the poll you just showed, is that most of America doesn't want this. The majority of Americans do not want this. They think that, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her final public appeal, they actually agree with her that it is right to wait until the next president, because so much is on the balance here. Let the people speak is what she wanted, and I think that's what the majority of the American people want. But let me just say one final thing. Don't lose sight of that. Perhaps the biggest influence all of us could have is in this election season. In fact, we preserve a host of options to undo any damage, even if they're successful in putting this person on the Supreme Court. We have a lot of options to reverse the damage that's being done only if we win the presidency and win the United States Senate back. We got to keep our eyes on that ball. There is an urgency now to this election. We already thought this was the most important election of our lifetime, but now it's gone to a whole different level in the stratosphere of importance for an election. So I'm hoping that, if anything, this activates. People need to use their time, energy, resources, and invest it in this election. In many ways, with healthcare in the balance, the ability to control your own body, the ability to organize in unions, as we saw with that being pushed back, voting rights, civil rights, LGBTQ rights, all of these things are now in the balance. Please, with all your urgency now, we need people to animate and really invest themselves in the election in November.
And Dr. Gupta, I want to get your fact-check reaction to what we just heard Donald Trump say about it really just affects elderly people, people with heart problems, other problems, young people. Don't have anything to worry about.
Thanks, Lawrence, for the opportunity. 200,000 people died, and what we think is that 70% of their lives could have been saved if Donald Trump and his administration had taken appropriate actions early. What does that mean, Lawrence? That means in early March, 2 weeks earlier, shutting down the country so we could reopen the economy more quickly. We could have schools reopen now here in the fall instead of doing what we're doing now, which nobody likes. We could have actually had 95 masks. People getting the masks they deserve, not just being told to put a cloth mask in front of their face, but well-fit masks that they deserve, that he had the ability to produce at scale if he had planned ahead, just like he knew on February 7th from the Woodward tapes that this disease was airborne. If we had enough of these, we wouldn't have lost 140,000 lives at least. So that's number two. So the fact check here, we can continue on, but I'll tell you, Lawrence, people want to know, hey, Doc, should I go home for the holidays? What's in store for the next few months with seasonality and colder temperatures? What about air pollution? Just given the smog here, what does that mean for me with respect to COVID? We don't hear the Surgeon General. We don't hear the Assistant Secretary of Health. We don't hear anybody talking about issues that matter to everyday Americans.
Malcolm, you've been telling us that this was coming for years. It's happening pretty much exactly the way you said it would. And now the CIA is saying Vladimir Putin is hands-on. He is probably, they have the word probably there, probably hands-on in this effort.
I think that was a very careful assessment in order not to infuriate Donald Trump, his number one patron. So, Vladimir Putin determined that he was going to attack the United States in 2014. That is the first time we received positive indications that the Russian Internet Research Agency was stood up in September of 2014 and started hiring English linguists and carry out influence operation against the NRA, American evangelicals, and co-opted Donald Trump at the Miss Universe pageant. So for them to finally come out and say, hey, we believe Vladimir Putin directed the activities related to 2020, that's pretty easy call, because you do not attack the entire American electoral process without the leader of your country ordering you to do it.
Let's listen to what Senator Kamala Harris said about this tonight.
I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I will tell you, please believe everything that has been published. Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016, and they will do it again. In 2016, they targeted black voters. It's part of the report. And you know why? Because they knew that they could try and tap into a righteous distrust of the system.
Malcolm, your reaction to that?
Russia is not the country that you think sprung up out of the ground in 1989, the Russian Federation. Prior to that, they had an intelligence agency called the KGB, which for 70 years used all of its deep academic studies and analysis of the United States to determine how they would move forward in propaganda and political warfare. The Russian Federation just adopted all of that information through its spy master in chief, Vladimir Putin, an ex-KGB officer. Now, what that means is they know us. They know us deeply. They understand the fault lines of America with great detail. And so we dither and argue and try to compromise over how we're going to carry out intelligence activities. They direct and attack directly. So Kamala Harris is right. They understand the incendiary nature of racism in America, and they attack that fault line. But now that they have their own guy in the White House to a certain extent, certainly rhetorically, they don't have to do anything. The president actually does all the legwork for them.
Let's listen to what the FBI Director Christopher Wray said about this on September 17th.
We certainly have seen very active efforts by the Russians to influence our election in 2020 through what I would call more the malign foreign influence side of things. Social media, use of proxies, state media, online journals, et cetera, an effort to both sow divisiveness and discord. And I think the intelligence community has assessed this publicly primarily to denigrate Vice President Biden.
And the next day, Donald Trump said, I didn't like his answers yesterday, and I'm not sure he liked them either. I'm sure that he probably would agree with me, which is the most psycho possible response. He doesn't just say that the FBI, I disagree with the FBI director. He then says that the FBI director doesn't really mean what he says, and he secretly really agrees with me.
You know, I find it fascinating because Vladimir Putin was a human intelligence officer. His job when he lived in Dresden, I've been to his office in Dresden, very interesting, was to turn people who came into East Germany into spies through manipulating their human foibles and their personal or financial challenges. Vladimir Putin must find Donald Trump an absolutely easy mark to manipulate because Trump will lie in the same sentence, the same breath, that he will attempt to manipulate the words of another person with a stature like the FBI director. So what that does is that sets your own country up, the United States, for absolute failure. Anything that is injected through foreign malign influence into the information sphere, that's the internet, will always be amplified by Donald Trump and will benefit the Russian Federation.